Hi, everyone. Just to talk about the highlights from the 17-18 year so far. Joanne asked me to do some of this before we started to talk about the money. Our wrestling team finished second in the Class Double C sectionals in Section 2 and fourth in the New York State qualifier. Bowling team finished second in the New York State qualifier. They were not second in New York State. They missed going to the New York State tournament by 18 pins, unfortunately. Jillian Birch, a young lady I've talked about a lot, made her third trip to the New York State Swimming and Diving Championships this year. We had two wrestlers represent Ravena at the State Wrestling Championships up at the Times Union Center in Albany, Juan Estrada and Brandon Mogul. Christian Carr and Shane Racy both qualified for the New York State Championships down in Staten Island for indoor track. Christian in the 200-meter dash, he set the school record in that event, and Shane Racy now holds the underclassman New York State record in the pole vault. He cleared 15 feet 1 inches to win Section 2, and he cleared, I believe it was 14 feet 8 inches, and finished third in all of New York State in indoor track state championship meets. So we had some outstanding individual accomplishments so far this year. Joanne also asked me about the numbers. I tallied up all the rosters. We had 246 student athletes in the fall, and 106 of them qualified for the NISFA Academic Award, which is about 43% of our athletes. In the winter, there were 176 student athletes. There were fewer teams in the winter months, and then even fewer in the spring. And we had 38% qualify for the NISMA Academic Award. So our student athletes are not only getting it done on the fields and on the courts, but they're getting it done in the classroom as well. Now, there's some bad. There's always some good, and there's always some bad. We had 4 students who ended up on academic suspension or probation during the winter season. We had 4 students who ended up on suspensions for violations of our code of conduct. But the code of conduct and the athletic or academic policy seemed to work the way it was intended, and those student athletes got themselves back in good academic standing and back able to participate with their teams in the minimum amount of time that's required according to the code of conduct. So we're talking about 106 kids, and I don't remember exactly what 38% of 176 is, but that's the greater majority compared to those kids that had some problems on the other side of the spectrum. So that's something that I'm very proud about as far as the athletic program has gone so far. Do you want to move on to what which top?
Nope, the right one. You got it.
All right, so here's the athletic expenditures. Ms. Moran and I sat down each year and we go through this stuff, and we try to plan a little bit for the future, knowing that there's going to be, increases in salaries and that kind of stuff. We tried to keep things level across the board. In some cases, that wasn't possible. The reconditioning line up there is reconditioning for football equipment. Helmets have to go out every year. They have to be serviced, cleaned, and inspected. It's a state law. And now, as of 4 years ago, there's a 10-year rule. You buy a helmet, and after 10 years, whether a kid wears it or not, it goes into the dumpster. All right, so I have to be very careful about sizing. A couple of years ago, we had to buy a helmet for a kid we called Melonhead. It's probably not the politically correct way, but big kid, big head, and we got him a helmet. We had to go down and swap helmets with a neighboring school district, and we haven't used that helmet since. And now it's 4 years old, and we're hoping maybe we can swap it back out with a neighboring school district who needs it so it can get some use before its shelf life expires. So we increased that because I went a little bit over on the reconditioning budget this year with the number of helmets that were rejected and then the number that needed to be replaced. The travel line increased slightly. The reason that increased slightly, I guess it's a good news, bad news things, is our kids qualify for state events and our coaches have to travel with them. We pay travel expenses to our coaches. If we didn't have anyone in the state indoor track meet in Staten Island, then we probably wouldn't have to increase that travel line expense, but we have consistently sent at least a handful of athletes on to state events that are held all over the state. The other increase down there you see is the uniform line. We actually increased it by $500. The uniform rotation plan, the 5-year rotation plan, is working well. We're on track as far as that rotation goes. We can talk about the uniforms we replaced this year, but we also know coming up that we have a couple of major or larger sports that the uniforms are going to need replacing in, and we're trying to maybe bridge that gap a little so we don't see this huge increase from the 2018-19 year to the 2020-21 year. So we're trying to keep that number relatively consistent and then make adjustments to the 5-year rotation to better balance what the cost of the uniforms are going to be so they're distributed evenly. Ideally, in a perfect world, from my perspective, we would get this to the point where I can take one of those years and distribute the teams to the other 4 years and make it a 4-year rotation. I think 5 is too much. It's like on the borderline of too much. The uniforms are pretty worn after a 5-year period of time. I think 4 years would be a perfect rotation, but that would cause a little bit of an increase in the uniform budget line as well to distribute those sports that are in that 5th year block. I have that rotation. I can show you the rotation and how it's starting to cycle back over now, and we're going to be at the end of a 5-year rotation after not this budget but the following budget. If you want to see what we've purchased over the course of the time and where we're still headed, I'd be happy to share that with you. I do always like to point out that we have also added modified uniforms in there. For the longest time, we didn't have modified uniforms. We handed them down from varsity to JV and from JV to modified. You can imagine what they looked like by the time they got to the 7th and 8th graders. And the other problem was, if you know my son, he's about this big, and the guys that he was wearing uniforms for him were this big. So they were hanging off of him, and they didn't fit well. And we decided that we would go with more generic brands and buy more age-appropriate sizing for the modified kids and put them in uniforms so that they weren't wearing tattered uniforms that were way too big for them.
Mr. Dorrance?
Yes.
One, I agree on the uniforms. I think that we need to shorten the 5 years to 4 years would be one of my recommendations. The modified, I think teams definitely need to be included or updated on the uniform, I guess, cycle or 4 years, because I know we've been playing a lot of catch-up over the last couple of years with some of those uniforms. The other thing I think that we need to do a better job, or our coaches, is with ordering the sizes of the uniforms and distributing to the kids the proper way. Because it seems like we order a bulk set of uniforms. I'm going to tell you 30 uniforms for JV and varsity. The coaches let all the varsity kids pick all the uniform numbers they want, and whatever's left over go to JV. The problem is sometimes we end up with extra large uniforms for 80-pound kids, and the uniforms don't fit. So we either need to order more uniforms or get
the numbers of a horse.
Right, numbers or different things that we need to do a better job, because I think we probably run into that issue off and on throughout a season.
I don't disagree with you. I know what happens, that's the way we do it. The coaches just say, hey, seniors who are returning, grab the uniform that you want. I would like to think that if we got ourselves into a bind where we were in an extreme situation and a kid my son's age was forced to wear an extra large jersey, that the coach would say, hey, guys, we got to swap something out here. This is crazy. Does that always happen? I don't know. Of course, if it's a really bad situation, I tend to hear from the parents and then I try to intervene. But I would like to think that we do use some common sense and it prevails. But I guess that's the thing that people don't understand. If you typically carry, say, 18 on your baseball team or 16 on your baseball team, you can't order 16 uniforms because you have to consider sizing, and over a 5-year period, there's going to be wear and tear. So we would typically order probably 24. And if that became a little bit too expensive for the budget that year, we might cut it down to 20. But yeah, we do try and take that stuff into consideration. And one of the big expenditure, one of the big cycles that's going to come up is the football uniforms. They're up in 2 years, and the last time we purchased them in 15-16, they cost $8,840, and that was just for home and away jerseys. We didn't buy pants. We've been using the pants now. We'll be going on 10 years by the time we order uniforms again, and the uniforms aren't getting any cheaper. And because that's one of the larger teams, and because you need a home and away uniform, and because you have eligible and ineligible numbers, we tend to order, maybe more than some people might look at the number and go, why are you ordering that many? You only have 30 on the team and you're ordering 42 uniforms. Certain positions have to wear certain numbers. We also have to take into consideration sizing, and then there's a tremendous amount of wear and tear on those jerseys, and we lose, 1 or 2 a year with a major rip, or we have to send it out and get it repaired somehow and hope it holds up for the 5-year period.
One of the other things that have come up, and I don't know all the different sports and what the rules are, obviously that's your job, is what do we do about, I've heard of socks, and having sock issues where we're making parents buy socks, or you find out midway through the season that everybody has to have the same sock and nobody knew ahead of time. It just seems like, and I guess socks we probably can't reuse, but it's something, I guess, do we try to do something ahead of time and say, go buy socks, or is that...
It's funny that you bring that up. That's what I would call a personal use item, and we've tried to steer away from those. We don't buy spandex for volleyball. The girls buy their own because it's more of a personal use item. We don't buy the girdles that football players wear underneath their pants because they become more like underwear with the pads sewn in, and no one, we don't want to throw them back in a bin and a kid has to use that pair the following year. But socks, for some reason, we still do purchase. I purchase green socks and white socks for both the boys and girls soccer team. We purchase socks for the softball team and the baseball teams that they wear underneath their pants. The girls wear the pants that are up high, like the old-time baseball clips you would see. The boys tend to wear their pants all the way down to the top of their shoes, and you can't see the socks anyway, but they always put them into the budget, and we still continue to purchase them. The other personal use item that we purchase are visors for the softball team and hats for the baseball team. Other schools have gone away from that. They make the kids purchase their own hat. I'm not a big fan of that. I feel like, I remember when I was a kid, making the team and getting your hat was like a reward for making the team, and I kind of like the idea that we provide the hats and don't make the kids go out and purchase their own. But obviously they don't turn those in at the end of the season. So we have gone away from personal use items as much as possible, but there are some exceptions. And
we probably shouldn't be buying anything that the kids end up keeping, because that would be considered a gift of public funds, would be my guess. And I mean, it's not, nobody wants a pair of socks back. I know in the old days we did. We took it back and we passed
and
them
we
on.
don't.
We don't anymore.
We hand those out to the soccer kids, and
so
they
really
get a season out of them, and I order them again the next year.
They ought to be purchasing themselves, which it becomes a little bit of a nightmare because, right, in soccer they have to have the same socks.
Yep.
So.
Well, that's where it came into soccer. We got to like the second from last game of the year, and the refs weren't going to let them play because they didn't have matching socks, because all year the kids just wore whatever socks they wanted. It's either, I don't care if the parents purchase them, but we got to tell them ahead of time everybody's got to purchase the same one, or a ref could stop the game or not let certain kids. I don't know what the rules are in basketball. I know there were things this year about different undershirts you can wear, and you're right. I mean,
and those are definitely all personal use items. You have to wear, if you wear an undershirt, it has to be the color of the predominant. So if you're home, it has to be white. Your undershirt has to be white. If we're on the road, our undershirt has to be dark green, and every kid has to wear the same color, kind of deal. Doesn't have to be a specific brand or a specific model. The shading might be off a bit, but I don't know the answer to the sock question. I order them every year for just that reason, because they are, by rule, supposed to be exactly the same. So we order the same style sock in 2 different small, medium, and large, extra large for the boys and girls JV and varsity teams.
I don't mind asking that question. of our school attorneys, because there are lots of examples of consumables that we use throughout the district in a lot of different venues, in elementary school, middle school, and even the high school. You think of the work we do in science, there are things that are consumed as a component of the program, so I'll find out.
And I would have to check on the sock thing. I know schools have gone away, and it was more for financial reasons than it was for personal use items with the hats, but I believe most of the schools in our league are still purchasing socks for their soccer teams because they have to be identical. So I don't know if that rule, that NFHS rule that says they have to be identical, is like the exemption to a personal use item, something that you have to collect. I don't know. I'll wait to hear back from Dr. Bailey on that. So when I do the supplies, when I reach out to the coaches and ask them for their supplies, I put it in 3 categories. Tell me what you need to run your program. So if you're a baseball coach, I need 10 dozen baseballs because I need to have game balls for modified JV and varsity baseball. Can't play baseball without baseballs. Tell me some things that you would like to have, some training equipment that you would like to have that's relatively inexpensive that I can take out of my regular supply line, like maybe tees or soft Incrediballs that we can use in the gym, a couple dozen of those, that kind of stuff. You don't have to have that stuff to be able to run your season, but they're nice to have as training devices during the preseason and for the development of your players. And then I ask them about major equipment, and I guess one of the things that I'm most proud of is I've been able to kind of work with the business office and create a major equipment plan, a 5-year plan that we're in the 3rd year of now. In the first 2 years, or first 3 years, including this year, we've purchased a batting cage, a 5-man blocking sled. We purchased a wrestling mat that we had delivered to the state wrestling tournament in Albany and saved ourselves about $2,200 in shipping, because they shipped it right from Dallas to Albany. They used it for the state wrestling tournament, and we went with our box truck and picked it up and brought it back here. So that was a nice savings and a creative way to get that wrestling mat. Bought a tennis ball machine this year for boys and girls tennis, a pop-up shelter for track and cross country to keep them out of the elements, and 2 major expenses were the high jump pit, which cost about $6,000, and the pole vault pit, which we just purchased for $12,000. Both of those were badly in need of replacement. Some things that we have to consider in the future: there's shoulder pads in the back room that are there from when I played, and I won't tell you when that was, so you can imagine what they look like. I would like to start to replace them 10, 12, maybe 15 a year as the budget allows. The softball pitching machine is in tough shape, and the softball coaches have asked me to get pricing on a new jugs machine that they're interested in. I would like to get tarps for the pitching mounds on the new fields and the home plate areas. They're such high traffic areas, and they tend to get holes there. That's where you get the puddling. So if we could take care of those and rake those holes back in and then cover them with tarps, that would be helpful and help maintain those fields. The discus cage netting, the safety netting that keeps the discus from slipping out of a kid's hand and flying into the spectators, is starting to get rough, and that's going to need to be replaced. Agility bags for football, and the soccer coaches have asked me about soccer goals. I didn't put that in there for the major equipment purchases above, but 2 years ago we did purchase 4 soccer goals, and then we got some new soccer goals when we put the new fields in. We got 2 at A.W. Becker, 2 at Peter B., and the 2 that work on the turf field and have to be held down by the ratchet system in the turf field. So, well, eventually we'll need new ones, because there's more fields that we have for soccer that don't have new goals on them. So the new goals went to the pair of goals that I bought went to the modified soccer field. Mm-hmm. The new soccer field out back, unless they're included in the budget project, which they may well be because they came with every other soccer field, that would take care of that problem. So that's on the list that I had from a request from the coaches. I just keep a running Excel spreadsheet, but we'll play that one as it plays out and see exactly what's included in our project and that stuff moving forward. But those are some of the things that are on the list for either next year or the following year to be replaced. And again, I have that, I have an Excel spreadsheet that I keep on electronic file of. I can tell you what year all that stuff was purchased, and I'm trying to do a good job of tracking that stuff and working with the coaches to foreshadow problems that might come up and major equipment issues that we need to start thinking about now so we don't get hit with it in December and need it for the spring season. So we can kind of budget ahead of time for it. I think that's it, unless you guys have questions for me. Is that it?
We're good.